Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for everyone that liked and subscribed on the last video. It's very much appreciated. And we're going to have a few previews of Game Week 4 now that our international break is done. Most of the games are done. There's a few are left, but most of them are really done. We've had a few mishaps for some of you, I think, that have players like Martin Odegaard and Calafiori in your teams, in that some of them got some injuries in the international break, which is quite absurd. And this is something that we're going to talk about, some of the potential replacements, some of the key assets, and a few differentials that you could look forward to as we get into the preparation for game week 4. So as I mentioned earlier in the earlier video, uh, I'd really encourage most of you getting data and information ahead of your games. This helps you prepare much better. So we have a number of links from Fantasy Football Hub, Fantasy Football Fix, and all the different sources where you can get all your data that can at least guide you and give you all the insight into everything that you need to prepare yourself for every game week. Yeah, so based on that same data that we've mentioned, we have a template of some of the players that you should be considering to sell, to buy, and those that you can hold or monitor over time. So this is part of what we're going to start with. In our template, we have a few players. I know some of them, most of you have. Some you're also considering. Some you're also considering to buy. So here is what we're going to go through. They're all grouped into the forwards, the midfielders, and the defenders. So we'll start with the forwards. One of the key players that is mentioned is someone that I myself had to sell. Is Muniz from Fulham. I had faith in him. I brought him in because their underlying numbers looked good. He was taking enough shots from the box and all that, attempting and giving all his best. But he has not returned in the last 3 game weeks. And it led me to a point where I was impatient, as I mentioned in the first video, that I was already getting impatient with Muniz. Now, as you're all aware, those that at least listened and watched in the first video, is that I personally activated my wildcard for this game week because I felt my team was lacking a lot on the bench, in forward, and as well as the defense. So these are some of the reasons and the underlying factors that led me to it. This is not to say that all of us should wildcard in game week 4, but it's something that you really need to consider when you look at your team. Is it really lacking, so that you do not just jump into the wild card because of the bandwagon everyone else is wild carding in game week 4. You can actually look through your team and see if it can buy you time to probably wild card in game week 6, which is another game week where I would recommend a wild card, as well as game week 11 and 12. So you can look at your team so that you don't just jump into it. If you can bank the wild card and maybe make use of the transfers, because with time, with this season now, you're able to at least bank up to as high as 5 transfers. So if you can be able to watch that, maybe it's something that you could use, and then you end up banking your wild card and make use of your transfers. So as I was mentioning, Muniz is the number one forward that I believe. Personally, I did let him go because I felt like they were running impatient, and the fixtures for Fulham are still looking a bit okay. But players like Robinson that are playing in defense, players like Smith Rowe, are other assets that I believe are much better and at least have a bit more nailed out minutes. Because with Muniz, we noticed in the first 2 or 3 games he has to get off in the 70th and 80th minutes to give way for for the Mexican. The other player that is to be sold off, that is in midfield now, is Gordon. Gordon of Newcastle is someone that I personally didn't have him, but Newcastle has quite underperformed in the last 3 game weeks. We all had high expectations for them based on the fixtures they had. I personally had Isak as well, and they really didn't shoot to the heights and the expectations that all of us had. Very many people I know had many of their defenders as well. That is something we're going to talk about going forward, including Isak. Personally, I believe Isak is not one to sell right now. You can at least monitor him. The fixtures are still good. He performed really well on the international break. I think he scored a brace or more for Sweden. So he's someone I personally would not recommend to sell. But as for Gordon, right now, according to the AI statistics and the data that is being provided, he's one that is a bit on the low, and most of you, I think, are selling him as well. The other player is from Man City to sell, and this is a defender. This is Virgil. Now, Virgil at the beginning of the season, all of us had very high hopes because of how he ended last season. He ended last season hauling and hauling and hauling, and most of the people that didn't have him at the end of last season really felt the pinch because he was getting double figures, getting clean sheets and scoring goals. At some point, he scored a brace and even got a clean sheet. So we expected more of that. But I believe the new formation that Pep has enrolled at Man City has hurt him a bit because he's playing much deeper. He's playing much deeper than all of us thought. I personally also had him as well, but I've let him go in my wild card, and I'll mention who I've replaced him with, who actually appears in this buy, monitor, and sell draft as well. So Virgil has his numbers have really, because he's not moving forward as often as he did last season. He's more during the corners and set pieces. He actually remains much deeper than everyone else. So he's one player that I believe we need to reconsider and sell. So the other, going to the monitor list, the number one person is Kai Havertz, and I believe Kai Havertz appearing here is mainly because of one or two factors. One is the fixtures. The next two Arsenal fixtures are a bit difficult because they play Spurs, which shouldn't be a bad fixture because, like I mentioned in the earlier video, Arsenal is capable of scoring 4 against Spurs. But then after Spurs, they play Man City, which now becomes the tricky bit because Man City is a bit more comfortable at the back and that closes out a bit. And the number two factor that I mentioned about Havertz is the injury to Odegaard in the international break. Now, there's been discussion of how they will alter to cater for this, and the high chances are that Havertz will fall a bit deeper to play in the midfield role, and Jesus may probably play in front. Now, with this information coming to light, Havertz is good when he has been returning very well when he was at the front, getting the goals, and he was among the top strikers, highest owned top strikers, I believe. If we can check among the forwards, you can notice he's already on 22 points at the moment. He's only beaten by Haaland and Welbeck, so he has been doing well. So the problem is that people are thinking with him having to move a bit deeper, it may cut back on his points, which is why he appears on this draft. But he's for monitoring. The other person is Mbuemo. Mbuemo's fixtures are good, especially after this week's fixture. He's returned, I think, in the last 2 game weeks. He had a hole in the previous game week 2. And he's one that his underlying data is really good, but I would suggest to monitor him until after this Man City game, and then maybe he can be brought in. I know there's a high discussion of very many people who have Eze that want to replace him with Mbuemo after this game week, so that is something that you could look into as well. The other player is the defender from Tottenham, Pedro Porro. They also have they have Arsenal next. We have we according to the data, it shows there are high chances of an Arsenal clean sheet than a Tottenham's clean sheet. But Pedro Porro, most of the owners that have him, I had him as well. It's not really for the defensive attributes, but it's more of his attacking attributes that he brings to the game. So he's capable of assisting or even scoring in one of the games. But as far as the clean sheet is concerned, he's one player that is put down for monitoring. So when we move to the buy list, we picked out 3 players as well. In the forward position is one very popular person who is Joao Pedro, someone that has been being brought in number of times, and it has led to a price increment twice. He's now at 5.7. So he was actually called up for the Brazilian national team as well, something that we also need to understand and monitor and see. But he's really looking good. The Brighton fixtures are really looking good, as well as the Brighton assets, as I mentioned in the previous video. So Brighton is looking good, and there's a high influx of people that are buying him. And the other is Salah, and Salah is appearing here for people like me that didn't have him, because most of us, the biggest number of us, had the Haaland draft going into the beginning of the season. But I think we've now realized, like I mentioned, no other player can balance balance off Salah's points. Not Jota, not Diaz, not Trent. So you really need the Salah in your team. And the other person that I actually brought in in my personal team to replace Guardiola is Lewis, who is to be monitored. I say buy him, but with a caution, because we are not sure. After Kyle Walker comes back into the team, we are yet to monitor and see how all this will go. So, but Lewis is a very good person that is still on a budget player and a very good option. Talking about Lewis and other budget defenders that we can have, we really need to consider buying him and then having him in our team so that we can monitor him and see once the Champions League comes in and all these other games start to come in, what exactly will it lead to. So the next question that I was getting in the last video was on some players, what you should do about them. I talked about Isak earlier on, and I think we're going to get into that now. So we have players like Saka, Isak, Fernandez, and Gordon. Gordon I've discussed. He appears in the sell list of our previous discussion. So the main other three people to discuss are Saka, Isak, and Fernandez. So starting with Saka, for example, you look at his fixtures. Like I mentioned, those two fixtures, 4 and 5, are not the best. But to me, Saka right now is not a priority sell. If you have him in your team, I believe you can hold him. You can hold him because, like I said, against Tottenham, Arsenal is capable of performing. Saka is capable of giving you results against Tottenham. Yes, Man City is tricky, but from game week 6 onwards, all of us are going to be bringing in Arsenal assets. So I wouldn't advise anyone that has Saka really to sell him and then begin looking on how to get him back in more than one move after game week 6. Sorry, after game week 5. So to me, Saka is really a hold. Isak as well, I wouldn't recommend anyone that is selling Isak. Isak is a hold for me. The fixtures look good. Yes, there's Man City in there, but Isak is capable of bringing results for you against Wolves, against Fulham, against Everton. So to me, if you have him as well, I think he's a hold. He was recently asked on what he thinks about everyone selling him and leaving him to go out, and he was like, "Should people buy you?" But he himself mentioned that he actually likes it better when people sell him, and then he comes in the Wolves game and then holds. So that's an extra motivation for anyone that has Isak in his team. Then Fernandez. Fernandez is a tricky one because Manchester United's performances have really been lackluster, but I would recommend first studying and holding to get him. If you have him, you can hold him for the Southampton game. It's a very good fixture. You can have him in your team. But if you want to bring him in, I would recommend someone to just monitor him because Manchester United is not looking good. They are not performing well. Yes, they have just come from a 3-0 defeat from Liverpool, but the Southampton fixture should be good. It's away, but it's a match that you can use to monitor and get to see all these Man United assets, including him, Mazraoui, Rashford himself, Garnacho. All these can be monitored, and so that we can even get to see who is exactly nailed. Because we saw a switch from Garnacho last time, we saw a switch from so there's quite enough about Manchester United that is not certain. So I would recommend a hold so that we first monitor them. And as I had mentioned for Gordon, that one was an assured sell really, because we are not so sure about that. Next, that we're talking about, there was a discussion and a question about a 4.5, the budget defenders that we can consider. And now from number 1, as we can see, this is in the estimates of game week 4 to game week 8. We've seen Aston Villa's fixtures are really looking good. We can have a look at them because I think I brought in Konsa for my team. Yes. Uh, the fixtures from Aston Villa are really looking good. Exactly, they play Everton, they play Wolves, they play Ipswich, Manchester United, Fulham, all very good, capable fixtures of them really returning clean sheets, returning holes for those that have the attacking players like Watkins. So there's no reason why Konsa and Pau would not appear at the top of this list. In number 2, Brighton, whose fixtures also look good. I personally brought in Verbruggen, who is in goal. But you can cover that with at least a Dunk or Van Heke in defense for Brighton. It would be a very good fix as well. Lewis appears, who I mentioned is for monitoring, especially when more games increase, and also with Kyle Walker coming on board and what role Pep has for him going forward. Davis as well appears, Robinson for Fulham, Guehi, Colwell, and then lastly Emerson. All these are very good budget defenders that I think you can monitor to have in your team between game week 4 and game 8 because they have very good fixtures as well, and AI does detect a very high percentage of them scoring points in that period. As I close off this latest video, I still encourage you to like and subscribe. Let's try to get the channel to at least 100 likes. Sorry, the video to 100 likes and the channel to at least 100 subscribers. I wish you all the best. I'll reach out to you again before the deadline. I believe I should be able to put in a deadline stream before the deadline, and I'll also be sharing my final thoughts on my team and a few drafts for those that are wildcarding. But like I mentioned, do not be on pressure to wildcard because everyone is doing it. Look at your team and assess it, and be sure that as you're going in, really, your team is not in the best fit, and you're really need to wildcard. All the best. FPL responsibly. Take care and goodbye.